You are welcome to today's episode of Tech Moments with Khal. I am Khalifa Ubangari. This episode will serve as a prelude to comprehending the principles of technology and how they relate to Islam. To dispel the idea that technology is only relevant to the Western world, we must comprehend the significant contribution the Islamic world has made to the development of technology. The application of Tawhid faith as a foundation for a comprehensive and holistic knowledge of the world is predicted by the Qur'an. We recognize that researchers, innovators, and logical associations of establishments, including colleges, see nature and various natural wonders from naturalists, positivists, realists, experimental, innovator, rationalist, or agnostic philosophical presuppositions, which are the main branches that contrast from the mainstream perspective in current reality. Then current science will continue to be one of the supporters of the grave emergency of present-day progress. In this regard, we support the efforts of non-Muslim researchers to advance a mystical or supernatural world perspective on the real world, nature, and life that is based on faith in the existence of a living and otherworldly creature and ruler of such. The worldview on the Qur'an can be deciphered as comprehensive and coordinated origins of life, reality, presence, truth, and misrepresentation communicated by God Almighty in His last revelation, the Qur'an, as a fundamental system of tenet, conviction. The foundation of this worldview is faith in the best truth, specifically the presence of one God, the most gracious, the most merciful. In avowing the absolute oneness of God, this is the conviction and attitude known as Tawhid in Islam. With this statement of faith, Muslims acknowledge Allah not only as the primary creator, first cause, prime activator, or supreme, but also as the primary object of adoration, teacher, support, protector, provider, ruler, jury, and source of supreme knowledge, shrewdness, and worth for all mankind. The quintessence of a truly monotheistic viewpoint can be found in the concise declaration of Islamic confidence, the sentence of Al-Shahada, that there is no object of love other than the one true God, and that Muhammad is Allah's messenger. Because God is constantly viewing, controlling, and supporting all issues, the tenet of Tawhid in its entirety and degree makes it fundamental that every commonplace demonstration or exercise of man must not negate his confidence in God and all that is essential and consistent worry for his quality. The conviction about virtue, supreme and firm rejection or dismissal of God's origination of unbelief, and any strict or philosophical convictions that repudiate these convictions distinguish Islam from other religions, philosophies, or perspectives. Trinitarianism, polytheism, pantheism, deism, anthropomorphism, humanism, shamanism, animism, family line distortion or love of holy people, of dead or living animals accepted to have divine forces is regarded as a lie, doubt, or avoidance. Similarly, in Western science, worldviews or biases such as naturalism, skepticism, scientism, physicism, realism, positivism, induction, free thought, mainstream humanism, logic, wariness, existentialism, and postmodernism are completely viewed as types of untruth. Throughout the entire existence of the Qur'an's vast universe, reality and the plane of presence are two interconnected measurements. The first is the domain of al-ghaib, the concealed world, the domain of presence and the truth that is unimaginable or irrelevant beyond human reach in this common presence. Recognition of God, for example, the domain of divine commandments, controls and decrees, divine creation, divine intervention, divine punishment, divine miracles, and spiritual domains. Aside from that, there is the Day of Judgment or Judgment Day, the resurrection of body and soul, eternity, the domain of angels, the domain of undetectable creatures, and the truth of death. Alam al-Shahada, the world that can be seen, is the domain of two presences. It refers to the actual cosmos, the universe, the world, nature, people, articles, or reality created by God, which can be seen with the faculties and broken down by human explanation, trial, and rationale. This created universe is contemplated and dissected by modern common observational and numerical sciences. We must understand that in its investigation of nature, modern mainstream science ignores, if not outright denies, the one true creator and sustainer of the universe, nature, and mankind. Nature, on the other hand, appears to enthrall them as the creative power and energy behind everything in presence. As a result, nature is considered, examined, and clearly seen as nothing more than actual wonders administered by characteristic laws with no connection to the creator. According to the Qur'an, this is the best learned wrongdoing and foul play, zulm, submitted by the cutting-edge mainstream mind. This treachery cannot be tolerated by Muslim researchers. According to Muslims who believe in the Qur'an, learning to develop science and technology is an attribute of their faith, according to great Islamic intellectuals with technological expertise. Muslim intellectuals are held in high regard by the community, especially when they are given the title Muhandis or are described as brave, intelligent, and hardworking. Muhandis means engineer in Arabic. Islam greatly aids the development of its people by allowing them to conduct experiments and research in any field related to technology. Technology, according to Islam, embodies the components of Allah's verses about which we must seek the truth and explore Al-Qur'an as Allah's word revealed not only for practical purposes. As a result, the Al-Qur'an as an objective is not an encyclopedia of science and technology, and the Al-Qur'an does not explicitly state this. This advancement brings belief and serenity to human life while also establishing facilities for human integrity as a caliph and servant of Allah, because Allah has bestowed upon humans mutually sufficient pleasure gifts, namely the enjoyment of technology and religious gifts. One of Allah's implied words in Al-Qur'an, Surah Ar-Rahman, verse 33, namely,
يا معشر الجن والإنس إن استطعتم أن تنفذوا من أقطار السماوات والأرض فانفذوا لا تنفذون إلا بسلطان.
O congregation of jinn and humans, if you are able to penetrate the corners of heaven and earth, then pass. You cannot penetrate it but with strength. According to Muhammad Assad, a European Islamic researcher renowned for his interpretation and discourse, the Qur'anic emphasis on securing development information among supporters in scholarly interest and free request has eventually resulted in a period of study and logical examination that sees the Islamic world. The Qur'an sustained culture innumerably and entered the psyches of Middle-Age Europe, offering assent to the recovery of Western culture that we call the Renaissance, and thus became generally accountable throughout time for the birth of what is portrayed as the time of science, the age in which we now live.
Man is God's creature, is utterly dependent on God, and is nothing without God. God, on the other hand, is entirely independent, does not need man. God does not need anything. God does not need our prayers. God does not need even our statement that He is one and unique. It is for our benefit that He asks us to realize these things, to pray and to realize His oneness, not for His own sake, because He is in no need of anything. So,
Robert Briffaut was trained as a specialist, but later switched to this investigation from the social humanities, for which he was recognized. His book is shocking to a Western audience that believes Islam and its development are based on misunderstanding, contortion, falsehood, and bias. According to Robert Briffaut, advanced European human progress owes its beginnings to the impact of Islamic culture, which created distinctive science and advanced a logical soul. Modern European development couldn't have ever emerged at all. It was exceptionally sure to them it would not have been. Expect such a character that permits him to rise above all past periods of advancement. For despite the fact that there isn't a single part of European development where Islam's impact on culture can't be followed, there isn't anything more obvious and significant than the birth of that power, which is the most significant separating power of the advanced world and the incomparable wellspring of normal science and science's triumph: logical mind. The presence of European science was made reasonable to Arab Islamic culture on the grounds that the Arabs presented new strategies for investigation, techniques of experimentation, perception, estimation, and improvement of numerical augment in a structure obscure to them. Our obligation to Arabs of science does not include astounding revelations or disclosures. Science owes Arab culture more than its reality. It was the old world, as should be obvious, pre-logical. Greek space science and arithmetic were imported products that were never fully integrated into Greek culture. The Greeks were precise, general, and guessed, but a method of patient request, aggregation of positive information, small techniques for science, itemized and delayed perception, test examination, and so on were completely foreign to Greek personality. What we now call science arose in Europe as a result of another soul of request, another strategy of speculation-tigation, from the technique for experimentation, perception, estimation, to numerical advancements in a structure unknown to the Greeks. That soul and the technique were acquainted with the European world by the Arabs. Briffaut explains that while Muslim researchers acquired Greek work, their methods differed from those of the Greeks. Following his depiction of the exact work of the Muslim scientist, Briffaut encourages his readers to separate the logical soul of constancy and diligence in perception from the theoretical strategy for prior the Greeks, which disparaged simple induction, with Aristotle proceeding to compose material science without directing a solitary test. According to Briffaut, considering Europeans as the source of logical disclosures and revelations is important for a great deal of confusion about the birthplaces of European civilization. He believed that science is the primary commitment of Arab human advancement to the cutting-edge world. this study, researchers used a qualitative analysis approach that was more focused on library research. Literature or text reviews are studies that focus on the analysis or interpretation of written content. To achieve high credibility in this review, the verses of the Qur'an that are relevant to science and technology as the primary source were used, while the source of supporting data is thought. Someone mentioned in a book or published manuscript that is relevant to the discussion of the subject. Logical exploration with political, military, and corporate whip foundations continues to put faith in science's conventional mental self-view of isolated virtue. Many people now see unadulterated science as completely deceptive. That conviction has the logical psyche novel admittance to the facts of the world that it can enlist nature as an ideal mirror, mirroring a target reality that is extra-recorded and widespread, seen as epistemologically gullible, yet additionally as serving, if intentionally. Explicit political and financial plans frequently take into account broad knowledge and resources to be directed for social and environmental control programs. The forceful misuse of common habitat, the expansion of atomic weapons, and the global threat of disaster are all prompting the charge of science, human explanation itself, which now appears to rely on man's own reckless madness. Many discerning and self-basic masterminds in the West have realized that the current development is in jeopardy. Tanas concludes with a statement of frustration with the negative moral and environmental consequences of the absence of an ethical compass in the logical and mechanical advancements of modern progress. The West has lost its confidence yet again, this time in science and the psyche of self-governing people. The incomparable authority of divine revelations as a source of supreme knowledge has recently been emphasized. The concept of information or science as al-ilm implies both information and science in the Qur'an, places the highest value on knowing God, ma'rifatullah, as the most important standard for all people. This, along with information on man's actual relationship with God, is the most elevated information and science in the Qur'an's chain of importance of information. Another classification of information is information and the study of life on the planet, al-dunya, which should not be isolated or separated from the study of al-din, all-encompassing Islamic life exchanges. As a result, Muslim researchers understand two significant classifications of information and science. The first is known as uncovered or sent, naqli information, which has unending worth. And the second is known as gained, aqli information, which has worldly worth. Classical Muslim religious philosophy, exemplified by Al-Imam al-Ghazali, has ordered the primary classification of information and sciences as required for the individual for all Muslims. The following class, which cannot be separated from the primary classification, is regarded as mandatory for the network in general. Fardu Kifaya. The Qur'an expressly warns against the influence of irrational theory or guess, zan in human thought, the negative defilement of human explanation, feelings or thoughts, and perspectives of human autonomy, and presumption, takabbur. It reminds man that without divine illumination and direction, all human explanation realizes best is outside the common life structure. يَعْلَمُونَ ظَاهِرًا مِنَ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا. All other things being equal, God's fringe information is just a bit. Thus, the current incredible wealth of logical information, inventiveness, and mechanical advancement should not prompt astute individuals, including researchers such as expository theophysicist Stephen Hawking, creator of A Brief History of Time and The Grand Design, and Michio Kaku, Physics of the Future, to think about mainstream science without the assistance of God's religion or a solid way of thinking can address all. The fundamental standards for the concept of the regular request can be found by investigating Qur'anic stanzas about ordinary mothers. Professor Ismail Raji Al-Faruqi examines these 5 standards in a philosophical style in his celebrated book, The Cultural Atlas of Islam. Nature was created by the one true God. Transience, which is nature as a common and common element, not a heavenly one. Request, that nature is deliberate, adjusted, and wonderful as demonstrated by the laws of the one true God. Reason, God Almighty created nature for a reason. Acquiescence, nature was designed to submit to and be subjected to human demands. The Qur'an repeatedly orders that the entirety of God's endowments be considered, covered, broken down, and utilized by humanity through natural detects, knowledge, reason, and exact methods. The comprehensive methodology requested by the Qur'an, specifically the investigation of nature, based on faith in God Almighty and a disposition of consciousness of God, is addressed by ulama, researchers who dread God, and the model of ulul albab previously examined. Logical, level-headed, and observational investigations of normal wonders are conceivable due to the dependability, consistency, routineness, steady circumstances, and logical results connections, and consistency presented by God Almighty in the actual universe. The conclusion of this episode is that skeptic researchers and naturalists and non-believers all have their own sources of reasoning based on their specific perspectives. Eventually, this vision combines the humanistic parts of human thought with observational methods for regard, deciphered as a strong urge to move away from a purely materialistic or logical perspective that is opposed to strict, including Islamic world perspectives. For Muslims, the perspective of the Qur'an is readily available for nature and social researchers to construct another structure of information that consolidates theory and science, and this perspective has created a magnificent human progress prior to the ascent of modern Western common development. One of the fundamental stumbling blocks to the idea that there is a significant shift from a common information worldview to a comprehensive information worldview is what Wallerstein refers to as the pride of man, soul of mainstream progress. We then observe that the new world request envisioned by this fundamental mastermind will generate new information structures in light of the genuine gaps in the current common information worldview. Theory and science will not be separated in the development of new information at this edge, and the epistemology of coordinated information will be reconstructed. Such a dream conforms to what the Qur'an envisions, but we doubt that this way of thinking will be like the way of thinking of the Qur'an, specifically the way of thinking of the ulama who dread God, and ulul albab of human pride has become the best human restriction. This appears to be the message of the Adam story in the Garden of Eden, in my opinion. We are pleased to claim to have received and comprehended God's revelations. We are much more confident in asserting that we are capable of achieving unending truth through human explanation, as opposed to some unacceptable methods. Furthermore, we are consistently arrogant in our attempts to force each other and our emotional portrayals of an ideal society. In our opinion, a sense of calm is required not only to comprehend the grave errors of contemporary mainstream human advancement, but also to examine and comprehend the universe and general wonders in a comprehensive manner. This soul, we concede, can only emerge from our recognition of the limitations of human explanation in comparison to the limitations of the concept of divine wisdom, our ability to recognize our true essence as servants of the one true God, our duty as representatives on his earth who use all of God's blessings and arrangements in accordance with the Creator's desire, our comprehension of nature as a divine property and a divine sign to be drawn nearer with the appropriate admiration and appreciation, from our dealings with nature as a type of practicing the trust that God has placed on our shoulders, and our investigation of normal marvels as a type of knowing and loving a compassionate Creator. We anticipate that Muslim understudies of regular science and innovation will be another generation of researchers, another generation of ulama and ulul albab, who begin their investigation of typical science from the perspective of the Qur'an. The logical information they gain about nature and the cosmos as properties, kingdoms, and signs of God Almighty from his magical and profound viewpoint isn't just for the actual benefit of human government assistance and progress. Its ultimate goal is to bring individuals and society closer to God by recognizing his signs, which include his quality, plan, and reason, his endowments and gifts, the laws of nature, people and society, intelligence, information and shrewdness, sovereignty and administration, love, empathy and benevolence, and his craft, balance and excellence. This information about the actual universe, al-Kawn, is derived from precise perception, exploration, numerical investigation, and scrutinizing thinking, which includes the orders of material science, molecular science, stargazing, and so on, as well as the determined information on strict truth. Al-Raqit, including Islamic theology, controls ilmul al-Tawheed, strict love, ilmul ibadah, social monetary exchange, ilm al-Mu'amalat, moral conduct and other worldliness, ilm al-Akhlaq, making Muslims' lives and works an exhaustive love, ibadah, God the most gracious.